As we begin this event, we'd like to acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. California is home to more than 150 tribes, and an acknowledgement is just one step towards working with Native communities to build meaningful relationships. Museums and many institutions were founded upon purposeful exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples and still benefit from settler colonialism and associated harms. CAM is committed to moving beyond a land acknowledgement and into action. We encourage you to learn more about the tribes in your area and find more ways to celebrate and support them. I am in San Diego, California, which means I am on the traditional territory of the Kumeyaay people. I'm going to be popping in a link in the chat, nativeland.ca, as a helpful but not definitive resource to help you learn more about the tribes in your area. And with that, Jill, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a longtime fundraising professional, so I know how busy your lives are. I would love to see people's faces. It's not required, but it's much easier to lead one of these when I can see people. I totally understand that it's also during lunchtime. So if you need to eat, feel free. I'm getting over a cold, so I have like water and like throat coat and cough drops. So I hope that we can all be mindful and understanding of where we are right now. So again, thank you so much for being here. So this is part one of a 4-part workshop series that looks at both practical and equitable ways to think through fund development in your organization. So my name is Jill Kunishima. My pronouns are she, her. I am based in the Bay Area. I live on Ohlone lands in Oakland, California. And like you, I'm in the business of mobilizing resources and funds for mission-driven organizations, institutions, and companies that want to grow time, talent, and treasure. I did not plan on being a fundraiser when I grew up. I'm here because I fell into this work and because I actually believe that fund development can help realize the society we want for ourselves and future generations. Because of who I am and the life I've experienced so far, I am compassionate, curious, and committed to working with all types of people to do this critical work. I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, and I've worked with all types of organizations and have raised millions of dollars in service of their respective missions and visions. I've directed strategy as a team of one. I've been a team leader. I've collaborated with all kinds of stakeholders, from donors, board members, clientele, corporations, all of it. And I've worked with organizations that have been around a century, as well as startups, organizations of 5 and 150. And I've worked from the ground up. I started as a development associate, where part of my job was answering phone calls and trying to make a website and moving from Excel to a CRM and sorting through socks for a shelter. And my most recent in-house role was as a VP of development. So I say all of this to let you know that I see you, because I've probably been where you are at some point in my journey. And before we really get into this work, I really want to acknowledge that I know this work is hard, but this is supposed to be a safe space. And I really hope that people can be open and honest with each other and themselves. There will be no tolerance for those who make this place feel unsafe intentionally. So please be respectful of one another, because we're all doing our best. You know, this is hard work. It's hard times. And I just want to know that we're on the same page. So can you put up a heart emoji for me if you can abide by these agreements? Thank you. I think we're on the same page here. One other thing I want to ask all of you, and I guess I could have asked this when you introduced yourselves, and some of you mentioned it, but can you also share your locations in the chat? I would love to know where you are. One of the things we'll do as part of this workshop too is eventually, and totally up to you also, is to create a little spreadsheet so we know of where each other are and where we are in our journey and our contact information, because this group should also be a resource to you. I don't think I would have stayed in fundraising if I didn't have a group of folks to lean on and ask questions about and like just, rant sometime, commiserate. So I hope we can consider this group of people also a resource like that. Awesome. Okay. One more set of questions, and this is also going to require raising your little hand in the Zoom. So my first question is fundraising your primary job? Okay, we have one. Two. Interesting. Okay. Raise your hand and lower, for those who just raise their hands, lower your hand again. Raise your hand if you are a team of one. Okay, raise your hand if you are reliant on volunteer work and hours to support your fundraising operations. All right. Raise your hand if you feel well equipped to fundraise. Raise your hand if you feel like your goals are feasible. Raise your hand if you like fundraising. Not yet, real talk. Uh, raise your hand if you dreamt about being a fundraiser when you grew up. Raise your hand if you're wondering why on earth are you here. No, we can skip that one. Okay, so I mean, I really like starting off my workshops with a lot of these kinds of questions because it's really nice to see the diversity in the room. I think, like I mentioned, like fundraising is really hard. And it can also feel very isolating sometimes in our organizations. You're not the executive director necessarily, you're not on the programmatic side. Sometimes you're a team of one or like 0.5. And yeah, it's hard work. But I think what I really want to remind people is, like, so we all coming from different places, literally and figuratively. We have different experiences, we have different sizes of teams, all of this sort of stuff. But my guess is one commonality we have is that we are here partially because of our own personal whys. Something in who we are connects us to this work. Something is making us go through this grind. And so when you are having a hard time with fundraising, I urge you to go back to your why, to really consider, why are you here? I know that I've done this work for almost 20 years, and so I have that to go back to. But anytime I think through, oh my God, that was so stressful. Why on earth am I doing this during my day today? I just have to remember to take a deep breath and go back to my why statement of like, this work connects to me. This work connects to a part of who I am. And that's why it's worth it to go through all this hard stuff. So take that with you. Take a deep breath and always go back to your why. I actually have like a statement, like literally like right behind my computer, and I just stare at it sometimes like, this is why I'm doing this. All right, we are going to move ahead. Can we go to the slide that says, what is fundraising? I am wondering if there's anyone in this space who's willing to define fundraising. If there's, you don't have to be right on it. I'm just wondering if someone would be willing to define it for themselves or for all of us. I see some things in the chat. Raising money for programs and general operations. Gathering support to enable shared purpose. Anyone else? You can write in the chat too. That's totally fine. Take a stab. You can say it out loud or you can type it in the chat. Raising money to achieve a goal or make something possible. I like it. Gaining financial support through community effort. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So as we can see, there are many definitions of fundraising. And I think it's important to point this out from the get-go because presumably we're all doing a similar job. And can we go to the next slide, please? So this is my favorite definition of fundraising. It's not to say that this is the one and only definition of fundraising, but I think it is important to start off part of our conversation about this definition. There's a few reasons why I think this is important. And one of them is it's important in creating baseline knowledge. It's one thing if you're a team of one and you have a certain definition of fundraising, but most likely you are working with others in fundraising too. And so whether you are that team of one or 0.5, or you are Stanford University, which I heard has like fundraising professionals of like 500 plus on their campus, you still want to be on the same page because you want to be facing in the same direction. Facing in the same direction is how we get to achieving our goals. So I think it's really important to take the time to define fundraising for your organization at some point in the work. I am one to like bring people together and do this kind of work with my team. But nevertheless, you also want the buy-in, right? You want people to be on the same page. So one of the most important things is like take the time to define fundraising for your organization. The other reason why this is important is it helps us dictate how we're going to do this work. It will create more clarity, it creates more alignment, and it brings also a big difference in how we begin to build a culture of fundraising. So define fundraising for your organization and then share it out. Any questions on that? Okay, let's go to the next slide. So as we defined fundraising, it also is important to think about success. I would love for some people to type in the chat or share out loud. What is considered success in your organization? Fundraising success, that is. Reaching our financial goals. Makes sense. Even or budget achievement. Gail Roberts is one of the best fundraisers I know. She's based up here in the Bay Area. She led Larkin Street Youth Services in the Tenderloin and did wonderful work there. And while this particular note is geared towards consultants, I think it's pretty applicable to anyone in fundraising. One, because I think it's very affirming as a fundraiser to read something like this. But I think there's two other things. One is that how we define success is also kind of up to us. The story that we also tell our organizations, our boards, anyone we're working with, right? If we say fundraising success is a dollar amount, end of story, then that's going to be our stakeholders' takeaway. But if we also say that it's based on how many people engage, for example, that also becomes a part of the conversation. So I think it's very, very tempting to define success by dollars raised. But fundraising is not formulaic. I mean, I think that's one of my biggest takeaways in this work is that no matter how hard I try, I cannot rely on a formula to define my success. People are not linear. Fundraising is not linear. It's not mechanical. It's not something we can say A plus B equals C. We are dealing with people. Fundraisers are diverse with diverse experiences, and so are donors. Donors are also diverse with diverse experiences. So if we do not measure or track other performance indicators outside of dollars raised, the work will not be sustainable and equitable, and it will likely burn people out too. Remember, fundraising is a process. One of the other things I want us to think about, and we can use the chat or you can raise your hands too, is to think about what are some other performance indicators you might want to track. So take a moment, think about what you might say, the amount of meetings we have with donors or potential donors, calls made, I think is always worth tracking. Events hosted, which is a big one, very time consuming, but can lead to a greater pipeline of donors. Board members recruited, volunteers recruited. What else? What else are you guys thinking about? That's a good one. Good press. How about timely donor acknowledgement? Thank you notes that go out. Everyone wants to be acknowledged for their donations and contributions. Just want to share. So this exercise, I would definitely bring back to people you work with because depending on people's roles in their organization, they're going to think about different things that they're tracking. And the reality is fundraising takes all kinds of different people to make this thing go. As someone who built up a department before, one of my performance indicators that I put into my own rubric was, did we have an annual board retreat that talked about fundraising? That doesn't necessarily lead to dollars raised, but I do think it will in the long run. I also had a performance indicator around CRM maintenance and making sure our tracking was accurate and clean. And, we had accurate information on donors and potential donors. Um, and I also had some performance indicators around whether or not people were doing professional development and whether or not my team members were taking their vacations or not, because burnout is very real in the world of fundraising. So this is what I say. Bring this back to your groups, and you're not going to do all of these things, but think about a few of these things that you might want to institute into your organization over time. Doing a couple things really well is better than doing a whole bunch of things really badly. So think about this, bring it back to your folks, and try instituting a couple of these. And share with your boss too. Any questions about performance indicators before I go on to another part of this? All right. Let's move along. So I know that this particular workshop series mentioned equity. Equity in fundraising is it can be like the elephant in the room. Fundraising can feel very inequitable, and for many of the organizations we're working with that might have missions that have to do with equity, it can feel kind of ick. Um, so one of the reasons we also should be thinking about these performance indicators is so that we can also think about how we do this work in a way that is more equitable. So one of the things that I think comes up in pretty much every job I've ever had in development was you only have so much time in a day. You only have the ability to focus on so many people. How do you prioritize which donors to get in front of? So I'm going to ask for the next slide. Okay. We're going to get a little bit uncomfortable now. And I'm going to ask everyone to imagine that they have to interface with donors. You have to plan some fundraising meetings with donors or prospective donors. You have a lot on your plate. You only have so much time, and you need to figure out how to prioritize your time. So I'm not going to ask people to raise their hands here. I'm going to ask people to think about whether or not they would prioritize a donor who lives in San Francisco or Austin. Just take a moment to think about it. You can make a note to yourself if you'd like. I'm going to ask people to think about whether or not they prioritize someone who is white or someone who is Indian or Indian American. Would you prioritize someone who is Latinx or Asian? And where would you put the Black woman who is a donor prospect on your list? Oh, and one more, actually. Would you prioritize the baby boomer or the millennial? Just take a moment to think about these different prospective donors. San Francisco versus Austin. Indian or white. Asian versus Latinx. Baby boomer versus millennial. A Black woman. So, some truths to consider. Austin is the fastest growing city for millionaires at this very second. This could change in a moment, but at the moment, Indian American wealth is growing very rapidly and is currently the richest ethnicity in the country on average. The Asian population only makes up 7% of the US population, and the Latinx population makes up 19% of the population. But the rates of Asian immigration into the country are faster. Black women are the fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs. And age wise, young people are giving more while they're alive versus a lot of other folks who have been waiting until they die and putting wealth in their trusts and estates. And even without wealth, young people actually give quite a bit. One of the things that I have told many of the places I've worked is that even though I care a lot about the world and consider myself to be very engaged and give to a lot of causes, no one has ever reached out to cultivate me. And it's an ugly truth. I don't look like what a lot of people think a high major donor prospect should look like. And I put it out there, not just to make people feel uncomfortable, but to make people think about what biases are they holding. I'm a 43-year-old, I'm a homeowner, I'm relatively stable. Maybe someone should cultivate me. So yes, we should all be thinking about our own biases. And we should also be thinking about like who's on our fundraising teams, paid or volunteer, who can help us see through this stuff. As a 43-year-old mother, maybe I need a Gen Zer on my team, or maybe I need a baby boomer on my team. I should be thinking about how to diversify who makes up fundraising. If everyone on my team looks and feels the same way, you better believe I have some blind spots in this work. This also means thinking a lot about our boards. I know that many boards that I have dealt with look and feel the same way. Who is getting a seat at those tables? We really need to think hard about who is at those tables and how they get there. If we are asking for over the top requirements of our board members, if we are only thinking about those who can write the big check, we are going to be inequitable. That is a guarantee. And I know that some of my organizations have done some really hard work around this. When I was in affordable housing, we decided to bring residents on our board, and that led to some hard conversations. People were uncomfortable, but were we better for it? Absolutely. Did it take a long time? Yes, but it was better for everyone to have these voices that were not there before on our board. It really helped us in the long run. I would say the same thing for young people. If you aren't getting young people on your boards, you will probably not get young donors or more young supporters to your organization. Consider your blind spots, consider your gaps. Really listen for those who are not being heard, and also bring in other people to make you see your own blind spots.